I'm Kim Edelston with FamilyBusiness.org, and today I have the pleasure of being with Janme Sinha, who is the chairman of India Boston Consulting Group and has written a fabulous book for family businesses titled Untangling Conflict, an introspective guide for families in business. And he co-authored it with his colleagues, Carol, Ryoji, and Brittany. Thank you for being with me today, Janme.
Thank you, Kim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, and what an excellent book and a fantastic topic, much needed by family businesses. So as your book highlights, conflict within family businesses is inherently messy and very complex. So your book focuses on how they can avoid disruptive conflict. What got you interested in this topic?
I got a call from a friend who has been a client once, who said that my father has just passed away. I'm sending you the will. Please read it and then we must talk. And I read the will, and he had one brother, and the father who lived with him had willed everything to his brother, including the shares in the company. So instead of being half and half, now, it had become almost 2/3, 1/3. And then actually I got drawn into this topic. 300 of the top 500 businesses in India are family owned. And, if this is the level of disruption that can take place, it doesn't just affect the family, it affects the employees, it affects the economy actually. Conflicts are embedded, but disruption is not. So, how can you just prevent disruption? Even if you fight, can you fight in a dignified way and resolve things in a dignified way, And so then we started exploring this whole area of conflict. What are the sources of conflict? What are the mechanisms of how you might actually be able to address them? We just wanted to be introspective in allowing families to craft their own answers. So we just want them to explore and understand the types of issues that might arise and how they might handle it.
And there are lots of books, for family businesses. Why did you see this need in particular, dealing with untangling conflict and really the way you go about dealing with it and not giving these formulas that would fit every family business? Where did you see that need?
A lot of the work in the literature was on issues around ownership. And what was not talked about was the emotional issues which often explode and create the conflict. And so when I started doing my interviews with some of the families, I said, it seems like the emotional issues are quite evident in many of these fights. They are hurts which just linger on. They are people feeling left, forlorn, rejected. And this doesn't go away. It injures people for life. And so explore that. Please explore that. And so we then went into things which a lot of people would say are totally fluffy. But actually, when the families read it, they really resonated with it. They said, this is really very important. And, you must bring this out.
Because these are sometimes the hurts or the conflicts that don't get discussed, but can really destroy the relationships, the trust. Yes. And you're right, it ends up affecting the business, which also affects other employees and, their suppliers and customers and so forth. So it's, I always get nervous when I hear family businesses saying they never have conflict. So as you mentioned, I know, because they avoid it. And that's really, really important how your book discusses, how to identify them. And then, I love that, some of the soft solutions. Another thing your book talked about, which I think is really important, is the need to define family. Can you talk a little bit about that?
When everyone talks about family, and when you ask a person, can you define your family? They always look at you like you're stupid. They say, yeah, really? What do you want me to explain? this is my wife and this is my son. And I said, no. We really need to go through this in a serious manner. And then it starts to come out, as to what is family and who's in, who's out, what are the rights of those who are in and out. Then we have to define the family for the business.
Really important. And again, highlighting the uniqueness of your book, where it puts it on the reader to kind of answer these questions and think about what works for us. And again, thinking about what might be family at home might not work for what's in the business and vice versa.
And, we identified 8 typical fights within the family. The patriarch with the children. That's fight number 1. Fight number 2 is between siblings, more often than not between brothers. Fight number 3 is between uncles and nephews. Fight number 4, between in-laws with each other. Fight number 5, between the elder or the leader of the family and the in-laws. Fight number 6, between husband and wife. Fight number 7, between stepchildren. And fight number 8, between excluded women. Daughters and others, aunts, who are really upset and they have enough voice, emotional or otherwise, to be able to create, real disruption.
And obviously, our audience can look into these. They probably can identify where they fit in. And, I'm certain that you discussed the different roles and how they trigger some of these conflicts and so forth. And you also talked about the 3 component parts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We found that there were the soft issues, the emotional issues. Then there were the hard issues, which were basically the ownership issues. And then the third was for listed companies, where the family is the single largest shareholder. They needed to be aligned before they went into the board meetings on business issues, and different family members might have very different views on growth, on M&As, on capital allocation. So they needed to go with a one voice. Otherwise, they dilute the strength of their shareholding in the company. Because the emotional issues, we actually identified that they came from 5 sources. The first was around unfair treatment or trust or respect, where somebody felt unfairly treated or that there was some nepotism and then they just felt hurt. The second was conventions, a convention that women will not come into the business or in-laws will not come into the business. And the most qualified person is a woman and she can't come into the business. These conventions which started to upset people. The third was values. Values in treatment of employees, values in treatment of ESG. The fourth was, different educational experiences, especially in India. A lot of children being sent to the US to study. And then they're coming back and they're holding their hands of their girlfriend in front of their uncle, who think, how can they do that? I mean, that's so rude. And, and they don't know what is going on. They've just been, at the age of 18, they went to university and, they don't understand what's wrong with that. And the fifth is just incompatible personality. And, you need to create a culture of transparent conversation, a culture of openness, a culture of apologizing, a culture of gratitude. The hard issues, frankly, are somewhat the easiest because they are about ownership, succession. The issues around this, the fights around ownership are fights when people don't accept what succession is in deciding how to select a CEO, and issues which are material and real, and which you can have structures to deal with it very much akin to what a company would have in a board. You could have a family assembly, a family council, you could have term limits, you could have retirement ages, etc. You will fight because you disagree with them, because you want to change something. But it's not hard to understand. And then the business issues are quite often because people assume that they agree, and they suddenly discover in a board meeting that somebody thinks that one of the board directors has done was completely different from what they thought would happen. I mean, why did you sign up for that acquisition? And the person said, I thought we agreed. So you need to have a governance mechanism where on these big issues, selecting a CEO, making an acquisition, these things are discussed.
I think that's great advice. And even though you focused a bit on everyone getting along and communicating beforehand for public companies, I would say it would work for any family business with an active board, right?
Yes,
Is the importance of communication before you actually get together and
yeah.
have these important discussions. Excellent advice. You also devote a chapter in your book to people working in the family business who aren't part of the family. Why did you think that was important to include?
I was sitting with a private equity CEO in India, who was going to invest in a company which was family owned. And I said, that there's going to be a change in leadership. There is a family rule that the person retires at 65. He said, no, we had a discussion with the board. I said, I understand, but do you know that the family owns 62% of the business? I mean, it is a pretty important stakeholder. He said, no, that changes everything. I said, well, so, I mean, I feel that partners, investors, employees need to just recognize the reality that a family business, the family matters. So an employee needs to know what is the nature of the family interest in running the business. Do they want to be owner managers? Do they want to be activist investors? In fact, in many family businesses, professionals have greater autonomy than they have in other companies. That does not mean that every position is open and for all periods of time. And so you just need to be realistic.
I think that's brilliant, particularly because any of us from a family business, I think we take it for granted. People know the idiosyncrasies of the family and understand the family's important role. So really smart. And before I let you go, I have to ask you final words of wisdom. So if you could share something, you have all these really good friends who own family businesses, maybe something to the next generation of family business. What's that one piece of advice that would help the family, untangle their conflict and keep the business healthy?
I was dying to quote Gandhi, and I'm going to. The future depends on what you do today.
Oh, what an excellent note to leave on, Janme. It's been such a pleasure. I cannot recommend your book enough for family businesses. There's so much that people can gain from reading it. Really start thinking about what they're doing in raising their families, the family's relationship with the business, and keeping it healthy. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.